Yo, everybody, it's Heat Override, and I'm ready to bring the pain for you with a non-sports. Actually, I went no sports this week. Well, we might talk sports. We don't know yet. To bring the pain. Welcome, Chris. Introduce yourself. How you doing?
Hey, my name's Christopher. I guess I'm doing pretty good today. I'm currently in like a restaurant in New Jersey, because everything in my life is just a complete mess. But I guess my big thing right now is that I broker coffee and roast coffee over in Baltimore, Maryland. Um, as far as sports go, I guess just to keep it on and off topic, I do a little bit of martial arts, so that's how me and Michael got in touch with each other.
That is correct. Yeah, that was the first time I met you, was when you came to sparring night with Calvin. And I was like, okay, I want to see what this guy's got. And you brought a lot of it. So where did this all start at? How long have you been in martial arts? I mean,
Oh well, I think I started when I was like probably 5 or 6. My old man was really big on like the old kung fu films. And so he also realized that I got into a lot of fights at school.
oh,
So he was like, "How do we solve both this at the same time?" And it was that I just got to get punched in the head in my free time instead of during my academic hours, and that turned into a nonstop. I guess maybe a glutton for pain.
it does. Like, that's why sometimes when I'm sparring, I just let the teenagers beat on me, because you kind of really have to develop that body, that tolerance for pain. Because if you don't, one good pop and you're going to be out the rest of the tournament, you know?
Oh yeah, oh
Yeah,
yeah.
well,
What's it? One good liver shot and you're just going down.
yeah. And you might be able to come back from a liver shot in a minute, but you probably won't. You're going to get sat down. I've seen some crazy stuff like yeah, let's talk about tournaments for a second. How many have you been to?
I've done 3 tournaments. I think that my first tournament was when I was much younger. I was probably in high school. My
Okay.
parents were never really big on violence, ironically.
Okay.
So my entire lifestyle choice and my personality kind of go against their proto quo, but they love me, so I'm living.
That's all that really matters in life, honestly, because I come from a crazy loud family. I mean, we're half Polish, half Italian. So, you get, my dad's the Polish side, and my mom, she was a 6 foot Italian, curly hair, black hair. She was that. She had attitude, always ran her mouth. So it's kind of like what me and my brother kind of got into it, hence why my podcast is Bring the Pain, because I don't really hold anything back. So I think that's really neat. And so yeah. So the tournaments definitely are a little crazy, and you want to definitely see, because when you put money up, you don't want to just be like, oh, I'm out because of this. No, man, you got to
Mm.
fight as much as you can. So that's it.
I guess
So you
sticking
get,
to hit. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
y'all get, what were you gonna say? Go ahead.
I would say like when it comes to the tournament, it's like sticking to hits is always important, but staying mobile and agile at the same time tends to be my shortcoming. I mean, the second tournament I went to, I was in crazy good shape at that point in time. I was probably at the peak of my martial arts physique.
Hmm.
I ended up doing like 2 or 3 fights. I put some dude in the hospital, and then I was like, I'm gonna take a break from this. And then I came back for a tournament at my old school, like an in-house tournament, which
Hmm.
it's not really the same competition level, and
Yeah.
it was like more continuous-ish because it was coming up as like team sparring became more popular with more traditional styles.
Yeah.
And then this tournament over in West Virginia was my fourth, where I got lazy way too early in the fight, and that cost me the match.
It happens. Sometimes, you see, that's my problem as a fighter. I'm actually a counter fighter. So that doesn't really work in point fighting. I'd have scored points with counter punches and everything like that. But sometimes, and a lot of times, it kind of catches you off guard. And, when you got those extra foam things added to your feet, that extends somebody and you don't even feel it. And you're like, hey, I didn't get hit. And they're like, yeah, you got tapped. And I'm like, all right, I see how that works now. So, and you're right about ring movement. I noticed a lot throughout my fights too. I started using the ring a lot more. And sometimes it kind of goes to the fight too. Cause like when I was fighting those really, really big guys, I try to move them around so that they get a little more tired, and then, get them off their balance and then try to attack them that way through angles. Let them make a big lumbering mistake, because it'll take them a lot longer to pull in and hopefully go in for the attack. That's what I've kind of lived on, because a lot of the guys I've fought recently have been over 6'2", 6'3", so it's kind of
Yeah.
like I can't stay away. So I have to be able to move and get in as fast as possible. So counter fighting doesn't really help too much in that. So that's what I've learned, but it is definitely a process.
No, there's definitely there's a lot of different strategies you can implement when doing like point style sparring.
Mhm.
Team sparring has its own animal. I feel like team sparring I like to drive and then just kind of push and just be really disrespectful with my spacing. That tends
Yeah.
to make people upset and then they get mad, they swing harder, they get tired, right? And you're not gonna like if you knock someone out in one of those tournaments, you're in trouble anyways. So
Yep.
I kind of teach you a little shit and take advantage of that. And just make problems. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
kind of the
yeah.
fun part.
Yeah, yeah. When Jose went to a recent tournament we had and he did the continuous, he got in close and started just slugging on the dude. And I'm just like, I guess that's what they can do, but it's completely different because the dude he was fighting is always point fighting. So it's always like he's a taller guy, so he just keeps people away. And then just you see Jose up in his grill just knocking away at him. And I'm like, what? It was insane. So definitely it's a different animal, it's a different beast. And sometimes
100%.
I get a little bit of that with the higher age because when you get up to like my age, it's like they just like, oh, those are old brute men, so they just let us slug on each other sometimes. But yeah, you still have to be within reason. And I've seen a few guys hit the ground. So
Oh, damn. All right. I
yeah,
mean, I've seen people go down, but usually they don't get back up.
yeah,
Kind of the key I'll be out there.
yeah. I was really surprised in my last fight. The guy kind of just kept jumping at me and he was throwing his face, and I watched the video back. He hits the floor like 7 times, but I hook him a lot. And I'm like, I can't believe he stood because there was a couple blitzes I did that just knocked his head back completely. And I was just like I did a running through blitz and he dodged to the right perfectly. But as I was going by, I just backhand him. And I'm just like, he took a lot of blows. He was older than me too. So I'm like, it's not like I know in practice I hold back, but when I go in those tournaments, I knock. And I'm like, I hold back, but man, dude, you took some punishment. So yes, definitely punishment and stuff like that. Katas though, do you do a lot of katas or?
Nah, not anymore. I basically, when I was in Taekwondo, I was pretty good at them. They always
Mhm.
pushed me to tournaments for kata, but I never really was in love with it. It felt, I don't know, it felt some type of way. And then after I got my black belt, I just kind of like let all my forms go. And
Yeah.
I was like, now I got college and I had a job and then I got injured like a million times in a row. And so now I'm just like, I'm just trying to stay healthy. But for
Yeah.
some reason, I choose to do it by getting punched in the head. So
it,
something ironic about that.
it is. This last week, we actually had a smaller class, so a lot of us really got to get in a lot of good fights with a lot of the big fighters. Whereas, like, most of the time, a lot of the kickboxers tend to stay to their side and fight most of the night together because they either have fights coming up, everything. So it was pretty good. I got to go with Derek and Luke in the same night, and that's kind of hard for me to do sometimes under their circumstances. But Luke did a good step back on me, hooked me right across my chin. I was like,
Oof.
nice. And Connor got me with a roundhouse straight up to the head too that same night. So I was like, chiropractor had to put me back together. Yeah.
Oh Lord. Well, I'm glad. I hope your chiropractor had plenty of glue, duct tape, and chewing gum because it's like a sticky job.
Yeah. He does the cupping and somewhere along the line that little bit of that glue that does help me.
What's it?
So
I mean, you want to talk about chiropractors a little bit? 'Cause, like I've heard some crazy things from both sides.
yeah, I mean, yeah, we could do that for a second. Definitely. Go ahead. I mean,
What? So apparently, like I don't know what happened, but there was the dude who came up with like chiropractic. He had like no background in medicine, right?
yeah.
And the actual like cracking the joints isn't actually any benefit to you. Mostly the benefit comes from like the exercise and stretching and like the cupping and the
Hmm.
electrostimulation that they apply. So
Yep.
I mean, I heard from my family friend who's a chiropractor. He's like, if they're just cracking your back, just get out. I was like,
Oh
all
yeah.
right.
That's why I really like so my chiropractor is his name is Steven Crayuza. Steve. So we call him Steve. And he's like a little gutty guy like us. He's this little like built little short guy and he goes on these huge bike rides from Erie to Niagara Falls, like straight up. He's just one of those bikers. He bikes himself to Cleveland, Pittsburgh. Like he's that guy. And I'm like, dude, I can go a few blocks and I think I'm all right. Like I go down to the foot of East Ave, I think I'm all right, right? But this guy's just like, yeah, man, so I'm gonna go to Chattanooga. And I'm like, what? On my bike. He's like, I'm gonna leave and I'm gonna be doing it for about 20 hours and I'm gonna sleep for 2 hours. And I'm like, wait a minute, you bike more than
Damn.
you sleep? I'm like, okay. And he swam across the harbor like a few years ago. And then I think when it was COVID, he went in for the 24-hour ride around our peninsula up here. And I'm just like, bro, you just bike. So he's that guy, but he implements cupping, of course, a full massage every time, and then the cracking, of course. So he gives us all of the elements, make sure that he also takes care of um he has this like the sinus knocker if we're feeling or we're having allergies. He always hits us with the sinus knocker. So he does a lot of stuff, and he gives me and my family a great price because we've been going to him for like almost 15, 20 years. So it's just been a good experience to see him and talk about, like, when he does Tough Mudders and does all these huge Ironman contests and biking contests and things like that, or just doing it for fun. And then, we in turn tell him about all of our crazy tournaments and things like that. So it's been a really good like relationship that's been so that, yes. But like you said, if some dude's just trapping in, doing it $85 and crack, bye. I mean, yeah, that's a pool and a half.
But that's crazy. It seems like you have like a pretty good working relationship with him, and I guess there's a lot of
Yeah.
like community loyalty that's coming out of that. It's good.
Yeah. Yeah,
I mean,
there
it
is.
sounds like local David Goggins is kind of my first thought to mind.
Yeah. It is good. And it's we see him every week, and he sees the wife and daughter twice a week because they'll come with me and I just go once. So he does all that with, that same deal that we've had going since, I don't know, like 2001, maybe.
Wow.
So it's just really cool that he's really kept us like that and just done a lot for that. So yeah, that's been a little fun. So passions, coffee. What got you into it, man?
So I guess what got me into the coffee business. Um, I had a friend of mine who was looking for a coffee source because he was trying to basically work around one of his current brokers slash roasters because
Mm-hmm.
he's like a forward facing guy. Yeah, I guess he's one names. I mean, I'd like his business to do well, but now we're kind of in competition, so it's kind of awkward. Not at the
It
point
is.
though.
That's okay.
So so
I don't mind that.
yeah, I should go find coffee. So I went out to Indonesia and Guatemala because I have family in both those countries to go
Okay.
source some coffee. And I was like, okay, um, what's our business model? What are we doing? And he's like, I need small volume at like a good price, but there were no details beyond that. So I went out
Mm-hmm.
and found the best coffee I could, and I was like, okay, using air freight, I can get them back to the States at like these prices, um, around something like $4 for a pound of coffee, but then the shipping is just as expensive, not more.
Yeah.
So there was like a lot of like little tricks I tried to pull to bring the price down and down and down and down. And then in the end, he was like, actually, I want to pay something like I don't want to pay for any of the shipping. And I was
Okay.
like, oh, dude, I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah.
And he's like, I'd rather just stay with my current guy. And I was like, all right, that's
Uh-huh.
okay. I mean, I'm gonna respect that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I was like, okay, well, I have all this knowledge, I have all this information, I have all this coffee. And
Mm-hmm.
one of my friends was like, if you bring the coffee to the States and you make it yourself, I'll buy it. And I was like, okay, so now we have this opportunity, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I get in touch with my sister. My sister has this wide network down in Guatemala, right? Because she's kind of a missionary down there. She
Okay.
basically gets with local children who are kind of being affected by their current financial and political situations because the country is very unstable. It was just closed for like 4 months in a row. It's like just opening back up because they
Wow.
just had like another political overturn. It's bad. There's a lot
Sometimes
of
people take the granted for what we get in the States and things like that, but they're easy to speak on a lot of those situations, never actually having been in those situations. So when you hear about those situations, you always got to give your heart out. You always got to try to give and do things like that because that means that's the world.
yeah, it's bad down there. Some people live on like 3 pieces of bread a day, and that's their diet. And if they can't, I mean, there's like the world's biggest, like I think the world's biggest landfill is in the middle of the capital of Guatemala, and there are people whose full lives are to go into there, clean up garbage, and try to sell 3 pieces of like fixed up former waste product. And if they can't do that every day, they die. And
Yeah,
it's crazy. It's
it
really
is.
fucking crazy. And I
Yeah,
mean, like, here, like, we live in like one of the greatest countries in the world because even the poorest people can like have houses and cell phones and access to
yeah,
medicine. That's
that's
not
correct.
really anywhere else. And it's like, as a person, like, the government doesn't just offer you. Like, usually they come up with an excuse. Over there, if the government's done with you, you're not gonna see the light of day no more.
Yeah, that's correct. And, like again, it goes back. We hear about it. We can all talk and see it or speak about it or watch what we see on the news or what the news chooses to show us. But until you actually step foot and actually see those conditions, I mean, I've heard stories. My buddy's sister was in Somalia when the embassy she was in the embassy, when they were under fire, and the family was scared because they knew she was in there. They knew that she had to be rescued in that whole situation, and that's back in the early 90s and everything like that. So when you see that, you hear about those situations, you're like, you definitely have to hear them, listen, give where you can, and understand what you can, and always hold judgment, because it's not anybody's place to judge on any of that, because just that's the way it is over there.
I mean, there's like a whole history behind why things are the way they are. So to some extent, if you can figure out what's going on enough to make an impact or help out a community or an economy or any sort of growth experience in a place that needs help, I mean, in my opinion, you should always do it. Which is part of
Yeah.
the reason why I got into the coffee business, because I mean, my sister was her heart was in it. A lot of farmers, their hearts are really in it. They're in
Hmm.
there like helping out the locals because they live on top of mountains and there's not a lot you can do there for money. And so the men kind of leave the country to go to like America to work to send money back. But then there's no one in the mountains to maintain the infrastructure.
That's
So
right.
the coffee farmers basically fund all of the infrastructure on the mountaintops to try and
Mhm.
help support these like basically single mothers, which is basically the entirety of their population at this point, which is insane. Uh, I got distracted, but
No, no, I
yeah, it's just
think
really sad and really opened my eyes.
yeah. So you buy this copy from these people that do this, right?
Yeah, I mean, I basically, as I said before, my sister had a friend who got me in touch with like one of the best coffee brokers in Guatemala, who now is in South Africa. Shout out to
Mhm.
Rob. Um, Ironically, his name is Rob Michaels. So
That's really, so
yeah,
that's crazy. Because my last name is Max, but at the same time, that's my middle name, so I go by that. So to try to hide, because back in the day when I first brought on Bring the Pain, I did a lot of conspiracies and a lot of like work talk and things like that. So then my job started listening to it, and they were getting all butthurt about it. They were like, "Yo, why you gotta talk about these things?" And I'm just like, "Oh, I'm just talking. It's just fun." And they just couldn't separate the hard worker from this guy that just wanted to talk and have some crazy fun. So yeah, yeah, I totally know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah,
it's
it is, man. It's a wild thing. So that's the whole idea of when I changed it to that. I thought about going heat override completely, but not legally, but it was one of those things. I just put it on there. So I got a few people back. They had a laugh out of it. But yes, I mean, I got into coffee practically when I heard a job position was open that I had tried for before, and I didn't actually hear about that job. I heard about the job first time. I went and interviewed twice, did not get the job, and then 2 years later, I left work one day and I got a call, and I was like, "Well, he's calling me." And I picked up the phone, and then that's how my kind of coffee. It was more of a career. I didn't do any of the roasting. I just did tasting. So they would do again somewhat similar. They would get bean from around the world, depending on how much they could get at different times. There's some beans they could get now. Sometimes they couldn't get that same bean months later. So it's been kind of a work with a lot of them. So I've got taste a lot of different coffees over my time there, on top of holding a lot of the Starbucks coffees, a lot of the Green Mountain coffees, a lot of the Caribou, a lot of the mainstream coffees, all flavored different coffees too. And then the actual company that I used to work for, they had their own line of flavored coffees and everything from blueberry to maple walnut to creme brulee. So it was just good to taste all that. I mean, we had a guy from Bigelow come up the one time and give us a tea tour, like in our place, and he had all these different teas, and I never knew tea was really that deep, that eccentric. But I will give credit to the Steep Cafe line when he put that on, and he brewed it perfectly and had it, and I tasted it, and we compared it to other oolongs. It was completely on a different level, because you could taste the actual, like the seaweed taste that you would get from, like, you want from an oolong. So for me, that tea would have been perfectly paired with like a sushi or like a fish dinner. I would say closer to a sushi, because you're maintaining that seaweed taste. seaweed. But that's kind of where, and coffee's the same way. It soaks up everything that it gets, or what it's around. So you know a lot about that. And that's kind of where I got into having a different palate for taste, because Maxwell House and Folgers just doesn't do it for somebody like me, because that's at this point it's just brown water. I need a texture. There has to be care involved, and that's what you provide.
Yeah, I'd say that a big part of actually getting coffee into the country is the whole transportation and logistics. Outside of it being expensive, you have to be careful that whenever it's being inspected or whoever's hands it goes through doesn't expose it to something rough. So I mean, like
Yeah.
if someone just throws it like in a Conex box with like a one canister of like, or maybe like one barrel that was soaked in gasoline once, all the coffee is gonna be, it's gonna taste
Mm.
like shit, sadly, and it's a huge
Yeah.
waste of product. I mean, I had like some of the coffee that came from Indonesia, the log coffee that I produced. Um, like I think 10% was destroyed because the customers just kind of opened it up and then
Mhm.
didn't seal it properly. And I guess some of the packaging was like aerosol based, so
Oh.
the coffee just tasted a little like really flat, and it doesn't really hold the actual water once it's spewed out.
Mhm.
So I lost like I lost money.
Oh, yeah, that sucks. That does suck. It's one of those things where there can be, when you deal with like produce and stuff like that, there's always that like you could say overture. You're gonna say that I'm not going to be able to get 100% all the time, but if I can get at least this percent, 95, 96, 98% of my being here, that is good. Then at least I know I'm going to always have a chance to make that extra money back, instead of giving out and having something like bananas go bad, or lettuce doing something like that, and just losing half your crop all the time, no matter how easy.
Yes, that's fair. I mean, one of the big things that like it is a business though, and this is like my first full year in business,
Okay.
so I do not expect to go positive. And if there were any, if there's any possibility of any positive, that was crushed there. So now it's really just about like building community, building a brand, learning to roast, learning to do business with coffee shops and
Hmm.
coffee retailers, and learning to do business with individuals, and like
Yeah.
kind of like bringing value to people's lives. Because I think if anything, I've learned anything in my time overseas, it's that somehow the people make up the business and you add value to the people, and that improves everyone's life who are connected to those people and those businesses. And I
Yes.
feel like I don't know, my mom was always huge on donations and very strong spirit of charity, and I swear
Yeah.
I inherited that from her. So
Hmm.
I'm always grateful to God that it turned out that way.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. That's something, my wife does paparazzi, and she does like little giveaways, and then, usually around like Christmas time, she'll get together like little sets and stuff like that she'll just do as giveaways, and just things like that. That she's not only giving back, she's also just, maybe that little bag of jewelry makes somebody day or something like that. It just puts a smile on somebody's face. And whether it be through a donation or a generous act or anything like that, or even just, hey, someone goes, hey, how you doing? You can tell her, have a bad day, having a good day, you, and then you kind of like get that out of them, and it may change their day for the rest of the day. That's, I guess that's what, like, people like an extrovert, kind of like myself, with me and my daughter, when we went trick-or-treating on Tuesday, I'm sitting there and I'm just like, I'm just going to be this little Jedi. But there were so many people that gravitate towards us and like, oh, look at your costumes, and that looks really cool. And it's like, no, we just threw something together. We didn't really think it was going to get like a reaction like this. Didn't go for that. But if it makes somebody happy, and then, some guy comes out of nowhere and goes, do you know how to use that sword? So I'm sitting there swinging this lightsaber in the middle of the street in front of all these kids trick or treating. And I'm an adult. Like, what is this going on? And my daughter's sitting there watching it go down. And she's probably like, I have the craziest dad in the world. Like, everybody else's dad just asked him to do it. He went and did it, actually. So it's just, I think that those little things in life, and they just give back. And that's actually, like, we always go to on trick or when we trick or treat, we go to the church that we were at and part of for all those years. And that's actually where I got asked to do that. So
Oh well, okay,
yeah.
perfect.
So it's that. And they do that. They give out popcorn, hot dogs, cider, no matter if it's raining or cold or snow, sometimes in Erie. They do that just to kind of give people some energy while they're trick-or-treating. So it's, little kinds acts like that that really go a long way, and just create and put people in the right area. And when you said building up businesses, that's exactly why I couldn't wait to do this podcast with you, was to talk about, our humbling beginnings and starting, our journeys through martial arts, and then our taste for coffees and how they got taste. Because I mean, this is your coffee. This is your
Oh
Molly Bliss
shit.
right now. This is live. And that's it. I've been drinking. This is the last of the pot. So I mean, I gotta go make another pot now. But it's one of those things, and that's what I wanted to talk about is with your coffees. One thing I did notice a lot of, they're a lot smoother than a lot of other brewed coffees or roasted coffees that I was used to. I got a few complaints at the place that I used to work at about their coffees and some of the things they did. And regardless, they worked that out and they had some great ones. And really, that honestly, those complaints I never took as complaints. They were more palate builders because that wasn't meant for their palate. Where I like a dark, someone likes a light, and a medium could be way too much for them, as we know. So with that, that's kind of where I developed that. And then when I noticed your coffees, because I the first coffee I had was a caffeinated cloud, and I got it all. I grinded it up that morning. I did a rough grind on it because I can do a fine grind, but for some reason I like the rough grind. It changes the taste profile for me and allows me to taste the bean because I have ate your bean, so that's the way it goes. I just full, yeah, it's just weird, but a
The
full
phrasing
taste.
is just perfect.
I have ate your bean. Uh, it So yeah, so I did the caffeinated cloud and I got it, and it was a Saturday morning and it was sunny, and I'm sitting there drinking that, and I of course I do a black coffee first, and then of course I go in with a creamer, and then creamer and sugar, a full taste, the three across three blends, and to get that. And the minute I tasted it, I was like, this is perfect. This is like literally perfect, and I didn't want to add anything to it. So then I added the milk and the sugar eventually, and I was like, this coffee is 120 million% marketable across any market because that coffee tastes so good. So and the roast on it is so nice that it puts you in exactly the place you want to be a sunny Saturday morning. And that is truth be told. And that isn't even me talking about the Bali bliss that I've had all day, because as a Bali should normally come off really strong, dark. And this comes off dark with a more, in my palate, more of a dark on the back end, but the through taste when it hits the palate at first and then to the back end, it's like a nice ride as it goes from like 0 to 60, you could say, whereas that caffeinated cloud kind of tees off right at the 30 and gives you a nice smooth blend.
Mm. I mean, so one of the cool things about the Bali is that it's Luwak coffee. So it's just some of the smoothest coffee in the world, because of the nature of it. I suppose that the story was something like when the Ethiopians sold the Dutch coffee, they told the Dutch that, only people in goats ate coffee, right? So then when
Yep.
the Dutch colonized the Indonesians, they were like, okay, you guys have to grow this stuff. And then you're like, okay, cool, but we want to try it. And they're like, okay, but you have to pay for it. The Dutch had this little stamp you had to have on things, otherwise you stole it. And the
Mm-hmm.
Dutch East India Company wasn't exactly the most ethical company at the time. So if you were
Mm-hmm.
caught stealing, they take your hands from you.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
locals, like Indonesia's always kind of been a poor country, and it's even now it's struggling even. But they found a way. So they discovered that there was a little weasel that would run through the cherry trees and kind of eat the cherries off the trees and
Yep.
follow them around and take the excrement and then post process that, which is crazy, right? So if someone tells me the coffee's shitty, I'm okay with that because that's what I expected.
That's right.
But
That's
but
crazy.
they post process it. Yeah, and it would be the smoothest coffee like ever. The Dutch found it like this is some of the best brewed coffee. And so
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to find a coffee that kind of really took advantage of the fact that the opening of the coffee was just smooth as butter, and then kind of spikes off into the aftertaste. And that's
Yeah.
kind of what I got there. The coffees up in Guatemala though are more, I look for more acidic coffees with
Yeah.
more even thorough blending and roast potential, right? Because everywhere I found over there, I try to focus on places that either took care of the community or were award winners in past years or this year. The
Yeah.
Caffeine Cloud won regionals for Lake Atitlan. So that was really good. And then the Caffeinated Elixir won Illy in 2018, 17, and 16. So those are both legendary coffee farms. And
Wow.
and they decided to work with me for some reason. And yeah, and I guess part of the thing, I guess part of the reason why the blends are also smooth is because I roast them at 100 grams at a time. right?
Yeah.
So producing a pound of it takes me an hour,
Yeah.
and I'm
Yeah.
always like, I think when I first roasted the caffeinated cloud, I think I roasted 25 batches before I was like, this is the roast profile I want to work with.
Okay.
So yeah, there's a bunch of like rotting coffee and a bunch of like my pot plants at home, and a bunch of my terrariums and stuff. So you can use it as fertilizer.
Yeah, yeah. Oh no, you can use it to ward off bugs if you get it, and you can put it in places. Yeah, it's got multiple uses. Like when we would get, a lot of like we'd be like, okay, we had this coffee at that place called Turbo. It had a Robusto bean, so you know, and we don't like that bean here on Bring the Pain. It's gotta be top notch. So that's like the coffee bean. I would sit there and I would throw around and I'd be like, I get these huge bags of it and they would just be like, we can't sell it or something. So I would grab it and I would just like use it. I mean, it was like 15 pounds, 20-pound bags. So I was like, yeah, I'll just put this out here. But you're so right about that. And a lot of things you said too is familiar since I've been out of the coffee game for a long time. I heard about that, of course, the Dutch brothers and everything like that, and how, you know, I had a story one time. This guy, he was from Ethiopia, and we had a Ethiopian Yurga chef, and I kept telling him about it, and he had talked about, putting it in the bowl and grinding it down yourself with the little grinder, and then roasting it over fire. I was like, all right, all right. So he actually one day made it down there, and he actually tried it. He bought some, and he came. I saw him the next time, and he was like, "You were right." He said, since I came to the Americas, that is probably one of the better coffees, especially Ethiopian coffees I've ever had. So, it really goes on to the roast profile that you were talking about and making things, more smoother with that spike at the end. And when you did talk about the roast profile and how many times it took you through trial and error to actually get those, I've seen them running in these books. I've seen them increasing temperatures and all that stuff. That wasn't me. I would just delivered it, sold it. That's what I did. And but to see you and hear you actually explain that and to, had seen them do it and try to tell me a little bit about it, that's kind of the idea. It's like, oh yeah, yeah. It's hard to hit that profile,
Oh
but the
yeah,
profile you hit is amazing.
I feel like there's a couple different like philosophies on how you can roast coffee to kind of get the most out of it. You
Mhm.
can kind of go for something more blonde and get more flavor and acidity, or something more dark and get more body and oil out of it.
Yeah.
And somehow, depending on when the heat exposure happens and how long the heat exposure happens, so you can kind of like spike up, draw back, spike back in.
Hmm.
You can spike up, increase. You can basically increase and spike down and go back up.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of different things I tried, but I really ended up setting on something more like a smooth time exposure
Yeah. Yeah.
after like an initial spike. And I feel like that really gave it the ability to kind of like just kind of naturalize and fully chafe off. Because
Yeah.
one thing I'm struggling with right now, which is crazy, is the blonde roast, right? How do I
Yeah.
get it to just past first crack using a hot air roaster, right?
Yeah.
And how do I get it to do that in such a way where it still has that like peanutty scent and flavor,
Hmm.
but it's not so like covered in like the meniscus of the coffee bean.
Yeah.
And I've been like really experimenting with how I can basically get to a blonde roast without fully roasting the coffee. And
Hmm.
I'm getting close. I mean, I just had a friend who reached back out to me to get it. So like basically gave me some feedback on how the
Hmm.
flavor's good, but the coffee just doesn't take. So I'm gonna keep working on it. And
Yeah.
bad news though is that my roaster just broke. So I'm
Yeah.
working with source company to get it fixed.
That's awesome. Yeah, if you the way, when you did that post and then you were able to find, finally work with a company and stuff like that. A lot of companies do that. One guy I know, this guy Josh, he does the video game place that I sometimes post and everything like that. When he got a lot of his arcade machines, he just had to buy a lot himself, but he ended up getting a little sponsored to where this company comes in and drops off really good state of the art new video games for his arcade so that he's able. But if he would have just sat where he was at trying to shell out money, he would have never been able to find a company that would be able to give him a good rotation or stuff like that. So sometimes just reaching out is that's like they say, that's just opening the can. You don't never know what you're going to find. And if you don't open that can, you're not going to get anywhere.
That's fair. I mean, that's a good point. I mean, I feel like, especially, oh man, like, I don't know. I went into this business without having a real clientele base. So I did a
Yeah.
lot of just door to door coffee sales and just meet and greets and getting to know people and trying to add value to those businesses
Yeah.
and seeing who stuck. And I mean,
Yeah,
in the end, I found a couple of people who are willing to work with me, and they helped me out a lot. And I thank God for their business and that I can help them out. But
yeah,
it's 100% that if I hadn't done that, I'd just be sitting and nothing would move. So
exactly.
you gotta start. That's the hardest part.
It
Start.
is. That's it. And that's like when I was telling you about the story of the owner of the business that I went from, and she started out in an apartment building. Literally, it was an upstairs apartment across the street and like off of East 10th down here in Erie. Yeah, no, it was West 10th. And now she went on. She had some health problems come up, and she had a business partner, and they tried some shady business. She ended up getting it back and doing it. She's women business certified. So she's had those journeys, the same journeys that you're working with right now, starting out, developing your own. She was more about selling. You are more about creating. You're more like when I was talking to you about her son, Max, you're more like him that, you want to create that full profile and that full experience out of that cup of coffee, because I think that's what people deserve now. They deserve a good cup of coffee. They don't deserve a processed batch from one of the main franchises like McDonald's or anything like that. They and that might just that's of course my opinion, because I've been tainted by tasting great roasted bean, especially now. And now it's just I can't go back. You can't go back.
Yeah, it's a one-way trip. I mean, once you have the really nice coffee, it's hard to like kind of move away from it. But something I've discovered is that I feel like not everyone enjoys the same experience in coffee. So I'm trying
Mhm.
to start an initiative where I kind of like work with my individual customers to
Yeah,
kind of create blends for them individually and uniquely. I don't
exactly.
know how I'm gonna do it. I heard that there's like another company out there who does something very similar, and I may kind of borrow. I'm not gonna return it, but like I'm
Yeah,
gonna
yeah,
borrow their model and see if maybe I can get the people who are really, really interested in coffee, who are really nuts about it, like
yeah,
the ultimate experience for that individual. And of course,
exactly.
the problem is that like every year I'm gonna get like a new batch of coffee, and the coffee's gonna be a little bit different. So every year I'm
Yep.
gonna have to start the process over, and we're gonna do it over and over and over again. Hopefully, we can create like a very customized and a very intimate experience. Because
Yeah,
I kind of want my brand for this to be like quality and intimacy, right?
I agree with that.
And maybe a little bit of violence and drive, but who knows?
Create a karate coffee, right?
I mean,
Yeah,
well, I'm trying
something
to
with a kick.
rebrand. Yeah, exactly. With a kick, I like that shit. I'm trying to get, I'm trying to get the visual bits kind of like in place. Right now, it's very minimal and maybe like a little bit less than I'd like it to be. And I'm thinking about maybe going something more over design.
Hmm.
We'll see like reds, blacks, whites. See if I can do something like I don't know, like martial arts, or like maybe Yakuza themed or something. I got to think
Yeah,
about it some more.
that's some
I got to
more
think about it
time.
some more.
That's some more time. Well, it looks like we're running out of time here for the minute. So I tell everybody where they can find you at. I know that, and we'll start with that.
All right, I guess you can find me on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Naga's Charm Coffee. It's a little red dragon with a little coffee bean in its mouth.
Yeah.
Um, I guess you can find me at Instagram or on Facebook or on
It's a hardest
LinkedIn. I
question ever.
guess I don't know. There's a lot of places you can find me. Right?
Look
I'm
up
sure there's
Naga's
gonna be
Charm
somewhere eventually.
Coffee. They'll find
There
the
we go.
link. I'll have everything linked in the link anyway, man. We get that. So before this thing cuts us off, I want to thank you again for coming on. I want to thank everybody that's, get to Naga's. I'm telling you, get this man's coffee. You will definitely want to bring the pain to your competition the next day. Have a great one, Chris.